Hello, everybody. This is Abe from Leverton. I assume everybody can hear me. Good. Quickly, let me introduce myself. My name is Abe Somani. I am the CEO of Leverton, a global AI data extraction and contract analytics company that participates in the real estate industry, helping large real estate institutions as well as tenants and service providers to extract key pieces of data out of their real estate contracts. I sit here in New York, but I spend half my time in Europe and half my time in the Americas, which gives me a good global overview of what's going on in the tech space within the real estate market. And our company has about 90 people. We're based in Berlin, London, New York, as well as a small outfit in New Delhi in India as well. So today what I wanted to talk about is how AI is transforming real estate and really talking more about pragmatic solutions that are being utilized today. So the message of this session today is turning AI from a myth into reality for the real estate world. Before we begin, I always like to just do some level set. Automation. Just one second here. Okay. Perfect. Okay, I think I'm back now. Perfect. Okay. So like I said, all of this really functions around automation for what we call artificial intelligence. It's the concept that we can teach a machine to do something or replicate something that a human would do. Within that, we have some subsets such as machine and deep learning. And machine and deep learning are interesting because they actually learn from examples, very similar to the way that a human mind learns. So before we had these machine and deep learning concepts, or before we had enough compute power to do this, you would usually use rules to create automation. So for example, if you touch a hot food and your fingers get burned, you might write a coding rule that says, please do not touch hot foods. And if you then touched a hot stove and your hand got burned, you'd touch, do not touch stoves. And if you put your hand in a fire and you burnt your whole arm, you'd say, do not touch fire. So every time we would encounter something new, some new experience, we'd have to write a new rule. And then those rules would have to be managed, and that would take a lot of manpower. It would take a lot of organizational skills. And to be honest, it just wasn't that efficient and scalable. I mean, there are only so many rules that a human can write and maintain at the same time. What we do in machine and deep learning is we actually allow the machine to write its own rules and do that at a pace that a computer can do very quickly and efficiently while also managing and maintaining those rules. So by learning from experience, such as this bowl of pasta is hot, this hot stove should not be touched, the hot fire should not be touched, the machine is actually extrapolating beyond just what it was able to achieve from the first item. So by learning that hot items in general, it might create a dynamic rule that says, hey, something between X degrees Celsius and Y degrees Celsius should not be touched, right? Now, if you take that same principle and you start to apply it to different aspects of automation throughout the world, and specifically within the real estate industry, you can get to really, really interesting dynamics and things that can be achieved. So let's take a look at some things that are happening today, right? AI in real estate, it is happening today. It is happening globally, whether it's here in the Americas, in Asia Pac, or in Europe. Almost 65% of institutional investors believe that in some form or fashion, they'll be utilizing AI throughout the real estate sector. We also know that property businesses, talking to CTOs and CIOs, which is my job daily, AI is definitely something that is on their radar. They want to be able to figure out how to save costs, how to be faster, how to make more intelligent decisions. And over the long term, the real estate sector will be struck by AI because a lot of these processes today that are very manual or they are cumbersome, or there's a lot of imperfect information in the industry. A lot of these will be handled by AI, leading to dynamic transformations in real estate in general and how people view real estate as both an investment asset and a utility asset. 70% of firms believe that AI is going to give them a competitive advantage, enabling them to either transact more often or be able to process more information in a much faster way. Great. So what are some practical examples of AI in real estate today? So we've got some really interesting things that are actually being utilized today. So for example, buildings all over the world need to be maintained by property managers or by the institutions themselves. You have things like electricity and light fixtures and water and cooling systems and HVAC and all of these things. And now a lot of companies are installing what they call predictive maintenance, which basically takes a look and aggregates historical data on the performance of certain key building tools and maintenance functions, and then uses artificial intelligence to predict out what could possibly happen. And they do this in a wide variety of scenario analysis. For example, looking at historic weather trends and predicting if this winter is much colder, you might have to allocate more funding towards your gas meters or maintenance of those meters. And so you might want to reserve capital right now, which has different implications for how you talk to your investors. There's even ways to predict whether a certain device or asset within your building is old enough that it might actually blow out and what the probability is that you'd have to replace something. Some of the largest costs in buildings tend to be elevators and HVAC units, right? The heating, the ventilation, the air, and the cooling, right? So a lot of those things, if you can use AI and predictive maintenance, you can certainly make those better. Now, for those of you in Europe, certainly more than the US, I would say certainly going green and environment and all of those kinds of things are of utmost concern. And it's actually the economic and more frugal thing to do. So certainly using AI to figure out how to be more savvy with in terms of being seeing AI and how to be more eco-friendly within your buildings, emit less greenhouse gases, use the AI to tint your windows so that you have less heating up or cooling. So that's pretty interesting. Finding market values of buildings. So this is pretty interesting and robust. This is basically searching through databases, scouring websites, and using AI to basically ascertain the ongoings of a building based on occupancy, tenancy, etc. So, for example, let's say there's a building and it's not publicly available as to what the tenants are or the occupancy is. There are actually databases out there that are scouring the internet to find out the customers or the tenants themselves, looking at their contact us pages and saying, hey, they're actually located at this building address, so they must be a tenant there. And you can actually quickly figure out how much occupancy is in that building and thus sort of predictively figure out what the market value might be given the rents in that area. You've got things like intelligent matching and image recognition. Now, image recognition is going to be huge for security for buildings. The typical building used to have a couple of security guards and a front desk that you had to check into and write your name into a book and then go into a manual system of record keeping. All of that can change with image recognition, mobile phone technology, and using AI to be able to ascertain whether somebody should be in a building or not, detecting whether employees are coming in on time or leaving on time. All of this stuff that is going to allow the institutional holder of that asset to have more information on the traffic flows in and out of the building, and also figure out, okay, what can we do to improve this lunch hour traffic and things like that. Chatbot assistants are very big. Chatbots, for example, can help with a lot of maintenance requests or any tenant afflictions that may be happening in real time. And so these chatbots can actually gather information about the problem the tenant is having, summarize that information, and then reroute it to the right person. That way you're not getting a flood of requests in and then having to figure out how to push this information over. The chatbots can also often just provide helpful information. So for example, something simple like, tomorrow's a holiday, what time will my building be open if I need to come in? Usually you'd have to call your property manager or send an email, but now the chatbots can be armed with this information and they can respond really quickly, thus again reducing the need for human effort in the maintenance of a particular building or asset. And then we come on to what Leverton does, which is data extraction and contract analytics. So basically here is where you have a lot of paper documentation or physical documentation. You need to pull information out of it, and you want to do that in a highly automated way. And then you also want to be able to use that data to start to predict out how you could negotiate certain key terms and conditions in your contracts better. So these are some really good examples of AI in real estate that are being used today. One other thing that's not mentioned here is this introduction of security bots. So at least out here in the US, and I've seen it in some places in Europe, they've started to release these security bots that go around malls and shopping centers and retail outlets. And they basically are constantly video capturing and feeding everything that's going on, and essentially looking for people who might be stealing things, people who might be causing trouble. And it's actually shown that these bots who work with AI and intelligence to figure out where to go and which places to examine are actually reducing the amount of in-house retail crime, theft, those kinds of things as well. Okay, now to talk to a little bit about what we do at Leverton and the application of AI and data extraction. So real estate all over the world is having lots and lots of complex contracts, right? The obligations and the conditions under real estate leases, under asset purchase agreements, under escrow arrangements, other types of things that may come up. And then, of course, you have modifications to those leases. So as you upgrade your leases, as people continue to expand or renew their options, you will continue to have more and more documentation. And so the original base document gets older and older, and the newer documents become more supplemental in nature. So you've got to figure out a way to get a lot of that information out of those documents, which today for many companies is a traditionally manual task, reading the contract, pulling information out, putting it into a structured format, and then somehow digesting it. And what a lot of companies aren't doing today is using that information to come up with valuable insights into how they can negotiate their contracts better in the future. So as an institutional investor, you can actually digest a lot of information out of your contracts and start to figure out, okay, what are some trends that are going on? Is there some correlation between certain lever in my contract and another lever in my contract? So perhaps I can figure out that this tenant A, they actually really like, a reduced a rent or an abatement period, maybe like 3 months free rent or 6 months free rent. And you can see that every time we put 3 months free rent into their contract, they tend to renew that contract 2 times more. So those are all the kinds of key pieces of information you can pull out of these contracts and then begin to analyze that information. Moreover, if you're an institution that has assets all over different regions or in different languages, such as across Europe, where you have multivariate language issues, this can really help to homogenize that data, get it into one standard format so that you're actually making asset allocation decisions throughout the regions you operate in a very intelligent manner, rather than just some sort of pie in the sky vision of, we'd like to own in Germany, we'd like to own in France, we'd like to own in Switzerland, right? You can actually think intelligently and say, well, actually, our assets and the contracts that we get out of, Belgium are actually substantially better, and the terms and conditions are less riskier than what we actually do in Germany, despite Germany being, a larger and more robust market. So you can start to think of those kinds of things. Moreover, there's just a sense of time and cost savings, right? Any work that's being done manually today, where somebody has to physically read, process information, type it into Excel, and then store it into a third-party system. All of that kind of work should really go over to an AI platform or a RPA type of solution, robotics processing solution, which is another form of AI. And those two things combined together can really help to take out the manual activities in these tasks. So when we think more robustly, what problems can AI solve in real estate data management? It can definitely help to improve decision-making or automate some decision-making processes without human intervention. What's really interesting is if you look at the hedge fund world, right? They've adopted AI a long, long time ago before the real estate world, and it's because they're transacting so fast within milliseconds. Within a day, they're transacting thousands of times, and they're using a lot of AI bots to kind of help to process those things. So the human still sets the overlay and says, "Hey, look, we want to be, long or short within the energy sector, and this is how much we want to set up the ratios of how much we want to spend." But then the AI bots actually go execute it. Now, this all works great when it's working great. Of course, there are drawbacks when that AI performs poorly, and you have things like market blips where all of a sudden in a few seconds, the entire market can drop, thousands of points because AI has all performed in a very poor way. So you have to be careful with AI as well. It's a double-edged sword sometimes, but hopefully overall it actually improves outcomes. What AI can also do is reduce poor decisions that currently occur due to the lack of data or bad data, right? So highly structured data, smart data are things that are often missing in the real estate world. I think we had a comment here by one of our colleagues that they're struggling to find a database of information that would help them to achieve certain goals. Well, that is because often collecting and collating that information from documentation, from websites, from other platforms has always been a struggle because of the level of manual effort that's needed. Today, those repetitive tasks can be constructed by an AI bot, and therefore we can start to capture data in a more structured format and hopefully be able to access better information. There's a lot of information that often goes missed within documentation or other sources of content because human effort just isn't adequate. It's just people get tired, they can't read enough, they don't have enough time, and you often miss certain key pieces of information. When you design an AI system appropriately, then you won't have that problem. The AI doesn't get tired. The AI doesn't run out of steam. Yes, you'll pay more for the compute power and all those kinds of things, but that all is, relatively has a positive return on investment. So the AI can run 24/7 and it can constantly be mining for data, whereas the human, will have challenges in doing that, right? Trend analysis, this is huge, right? In asset portfolios, being able to audit data and quickly go through and access source documentation can give you a good sense of trends that are going on in a market. So let's say you're looking at a particular city in which you own a bunch of assets and you already feel like you're very heavy in your asset allocation there. So you say, hey, we already have 10 assets in Paris. Should we really be buying an 11th asset? Well, being able to use AI to compare and contrast terms and conditions across all your different cities and your portfolio can help you come to a decision that maybe, hey, we don't want to buy an 11th asset in Paris. Even though we're getting a good deal, it's just not good for our portfolio overall. And the terms and conditions that we're getting in other cities in Europe are actually being better. Regulations, look, with AI, with data, with privacy, we're seeing big time in Europe that AI and this big data thing that's going on, especially with some of the big companies like Facebook and Google. Regulations are going to only increase. So you're going to have more accounting regulations, more real estate regulations. People are going to want more transparency in what's going on. And institutions are going to be required to comply with those. And if you think that by any means you can sidestep this or not think about budgeting for it, you're probably wrong. These regulations are going to be costly. They are going to be expensive. In the end of the day, I think GDPR, although not very well organized, I think it could be expensive for companies if they're not in compliance. IFRS 16, US GAAP ASC 842, I see IFRS 17 coming down the line. All of these regulations are going to get more and more stringent, and I think the regulatory authorities are going to become more heavily penalizing on a lot of these things as time goes on. And then finally, saving time and costs while also building a structured data set. There's no question that while AI provides all these great things that you could be doing, a very pragmatic reason to implement AI is because it will actually save you time and costs. And in a market where real estate is getting more and more competitive, where assets are becoming more and more expensive and things are becoming tougher to get by, it is certainly in everybody's interest to save time and costs and be more efficient with both the dollars and the minutes that you have. And certainly the implementation of AI, whether it's in managing your buildings better and using predictive maintenance, whether it's a chatbot that will resolve tenant issues before they escalate up to a property manager, or whether it's being able to automatically read your real estate leases and tell you how to negotiate your contracts better. All of these things will, in the long run, save you time, save you money. And as we all know, owning assets is pretty straightforward, right? You collect rent, you pay your expenses, and you have net operating income, and you distribute that to your investors, your shareholders, etc., right? And anything you can do to increase your revenue and lower your operational costs will increase that net operating income. And AI is certainly a key component, especially in that reduction of operating costs area. And with that, that concludes my quick presentation. At Leverton, we absolutely believe in our motto that better data will lead to smarter decisions. And we think the real estate world is absolutely primed for an AI takeover. And I think institutions that can understand that earlier on and start to make those early investments are going to be the beneficiaries in the long term of having more sophisticated data, more intelligent and automated decision-making processes, and overall provide better return on investment to both their capital investors and their strategic shareholders. So thank you very much, and happy to answer any questions. I think there is a QA button in the top if anybody has any questions. Otherwise, you can also post it in the chat. Okay, looks like we got a question. I'll just repeat the question here. For training the AI for TNC, how many examples are normally needed? That's a great question. Actually, we've done some math now, and typically, you need to see about 250 to 500 examples for a particular individual term or condition, where you start to get to about 30 to 40% accuracy. By the time you get to about 2,000 examples, you start to get to about 70, 80% accuracy. And then by the time you get to 10,000 examples, you start hitting that high 90% accuracy. So the curve is actually sort of asymptotic. As you add more and more, it gets closer and closer to 100%, but it becomes harder and harder. Yeah, so just a follow-up to that, we have T's and C's in different languages, Swiss, English, and German. Do we need to train per language? Yeah, that's correct. You do need to train per language. The AI learns like a baby or a child, and you do need to train per language. Luckily, for somebody like Leverton, we already have pre-trained models, especially in English and German, and a little bit in Swiss. So you wouldn't be starting off from scratch. You'd be able to actually start with some level of AI right from the get-go. I've got a question from Ross here. There seems to be some confusion between AI and machine learning. How do you see the difference? So I think AI is much more of the broader concept. It's this top level kind of artificial intelligence. And then within it, you have certain subsets like machine learning, deep learning, you have robotics process automation. So AI is this overarching concept of, automation through the replication of human behavior. And then machine learning is specifically that behavior learned through examples, and deep learning is an even deeper subset of that. And then you have stuff like robotics process automation, for example, which doesn't really use any neural networks, but is basically bots that are replicating human behavior. So I'd also consider that as sort of a part of AI. Robotics process automation would be used for, let's say, invoice processing, for example, right? So you might have an AI tool like us that's pulling the data out of invoices, but then the RPA solution is actually inputting it into an ERP system, settling the accounts payables, and actually getting the payments made to your variety of vendors. So there's lots of things that RPA is doing in that space. Continuing with the TNC example, what data would the NLP be able to extract? Really anything that you can think of. That's the beauty of this is it's more up to your imagination. So renewal options, audit rights, termination clauses, handover conditions, grant roles, right, ROFOs, ROFers, sublease clauses, really anything that you can do. Let's see. Do you see image recognition playing a role in Proptech in the future? I absolutely do. I definitely see it in the security space for sure as a starter, but I also see it coming in through satellite imaging. So I've actually spoken to a couple of guys who do roofing. So they actually fix roofs all over the world. And that's their business. And it's very interesting. They're now sending drones up to do image recognition of roofs. And they're actually using calculus to like figure out how large these roofs are. And based on data that they're figuring out on how old the building is and when the last time the roof was repaired, they're actually having their sales guys go out to the market targeting buildings that they know the roof is old or it's 10 or 20 years old and going to them and saying, hey, we'll give you a discount. We know your roof is old. And it's actually working really great for them. So I think image recognition, video recognition is going to be definitely huge in real estate for sure. How does AI interact with the Internet of Things? I mean, this is a perfect example of where you see things in the property maintenance space, right? So Internet of Things is going to be all your meters and your metrics that you're taking off of your building performance. How are your HVAC systems doing? How much electricity are you using? I think the Internet of Things collects that data and it's an aggregator of data. And I think if you combine that with some AI modules, you'll be able to interpret that data and start to extrapolate out. So I think they go hand in hand. Internet of Things helps you to get that structured data, especially out of the physical world, whereas AI can help process that data and give you some insight into it. All right. Yep, somebody's starting a thesis in the field of real estate development with smart technology. You can absolutely reach out to me after this. I'm sure the folks at Global Prop can provide my contact information, and I'm happy to discuss. What kind of tool software are you using to achieve AI solutions? There's tons of solutions out there, which is kind of incredible. Part of it is that you have to kind of weed out and see what you want to use and how much you want to make an investment. There are software solutions like Leverton, for example, that are relatively out of the box, and they can basically, you can start using it day one without a lot of implementation or integration. And then there's more robust tools that require a little bit more programming effort, such as UiPath or Blue Prism, which are more in the robotics process side. Or if you want to implement your own machine and deep learning, you can obviously grab TensorFlow, which is freely available. But you're definitely going to need some engineers to develop some sort of coding algorithms around that basic engine. So there's a lot of software out there that's using AI. And would definitely encourage you to look out for it. How would your products compare to something like Stanford NLP for feature extraction? I think ours is a little bit more detailed than that, but the core principles are very similar. But because we have so much experience in the real estate sector, we know very much how to pull information and structure the data for the real estate world in particular. And I think that's what it's really going to come down to. There's a lot of generic engines out there, but you really need to get your AI smart within a particular sector. So I wouldn't claim to say that we're great at the, oil and gas space. We absolutely would love to get into it, but we're not good at that yet. Today, we're very good at real estate. We're very good at insurance. We're very good at banking and financial sector. And so we've developed some really key algorithms within those spaces to help process that type of documentation. And with that, I think I've gotten through most of the Q&A, and we're right up at the end of time here. So first of all, I want to thank Walter Trufino and the folks at Global Proptech for inviting me onto this keynote. I hope this was helpful, and I hope that I can be of assistance in the future. If you ever have any interest in learning more about Leverton, my contact information is there at the bottom of the screen, and the Global Proptech people could help you out with that. Would love to talk to you more offline and help you to understand anything that you might have relating to AI, machine learning, deep learning, and real estate. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much for your keynote, and everybody have a great day. Bye.